At 3 a.m., my dad broke into my apartment and whispered, "Jasper says you're next." I installed cameras and sent the footage to security. It was exactly 3 a.m. when I heard the sound. Not loud, not violent, just this slow, deliberate rattle at the front door. I sat up in bed, heart thudding like it used to when I was a kid, and thought monsters lived in the attic. I grabbed my phone and flicked on the bedside lamp, and that's when I heard it again, a soft knock, followed by the creak of the floorboards in the entryway. Someone was inside. I stumbled out of bed, still half asleep, and reached for the baseball bat I kept under the dresser, more for show than anything, until that moment. I crept down the hall, bare feet nearly silent on the wooden floor. When I turned the corner into the living room, I froze. My father, my estranged, wildly unpredictable father, was standing there like he owned the place. His hair was thinner than I remembered, a gray mess swept back with one hand like he'd been running his fingers through it in a panic. He looked thinner, too, paler, but his eyes? They hadn't changed. Still sunken, still darting like he was trying to find something no one else could see. "Dad," I said, the bat lowering against my side. "What the hell are you?" He turned to me slowly, as if he hadn't known I was there. "Jasper says you're next," he whispered. My spine went cold. "Jesus, Dad. It's the middle of the night. What are you even?" But he was already turning, heading for the front door like he hadn't just dropped a bomb in my living room. The door clicked shut behind him, and just like that, he was gone again. The next morning, I bought security cameras and installed them before I even had coffee. 2 outside, 1 inside, motion alerts, cloud backup. I filed an incident report with workplace security, not because I thought they'd do anything, but because I needed someone to know. Someone official. I didn't say it was my father. I said it was a family member exhibiting unusual behavior. Close enough. I didn't sleep much that week. Growing up, March 22nd was never just another day. Not in our house. That was landing night. A tradition Gordon, Dad, held sacred. It was the one time every year when the family ritual took over everything else. No excuses. No missing it. He'd say it was to honor our ancestors, a lineage of iron men from the sea, as he called them. Sailors. Survivors. Supposedly, we had seafaring blood going back centuries. But no matter how often he said it, I never found a single record to back it up. Landing night meant 18 hours spent in the dark cargo hold of an old, decommissioned sailboat docked at the family's dry lot just south of Rockport. No phones. No light. No food, sometimes. Just us, inside that stale, splintered, black box. He called it a tribute. A reenactment of endurance. I called it hell. I must have been 7 or 8 the first time I went down there. I remember the way the air felt. Wet, metallic, heavy. I remember Gordon lowering the hatch and leaving us in pitch black. I remember counting minutes. Then hours. My sister Emma sobbing quietly across from me, whispering that she saw something move. And I remember Gordon's voice, muffled through the deck above, telling us to stop crying and start listening. That pain was the point. That it was our right. You honor the bloodline, he said once, by enduring what they did, by reliving the worst night and choosing to stay. Even back then, something in that logic felt broken. But I didn't question it, not out loud. Not until years later. Now, decades removed, here I was again, flinching at creaking floorboards and locking up like a scared kid because my father had crept back into my home just to mutter ghost stories. Jasper says you're next. That was the part one couldn't shake. Jasper. A name I hadn't heard in years. Not since the boat. Not since the stories. And definitely not since Gordon started talking to people who weren't there. I was 12 the first time someone outside the family heard about landing night. His name was Marcus Holland. We were in the 6th grade together at Mayfield Middle School, and for whatever reason, he liked me. The kind of kid who invited people over for cookouts and shared snacks at lunch. Friendly. Normal. Which already made him an alien in my world. He asked me to go to the school campout that spring. Overnight tents on the school lawn, marshmallows, a movie projected on a sheet, standard stuff. I wanted to go, desperately, but the date landed on March 22nd. Landing night. When I told him I couldn't make it, he asked why. I hesitated. Lied at first. Said it was a family tradition thing. But Marcus wasn't the type to let things slide. He pushed. So I told him. Not everything. Just the basics. We go to this old boat my dad owns and spend the night in the cargo hold. The whole night, he asked. Yeah, 18 hours. Why? I shrugged. My dad says it honors our ancestors. Some kind of naval survival thing. Like, we're supposed to endure what they did. Marcus stared at me for a second, like I'd just said we sleep in coffins or something. That's twisted, he finally said. You're joking, right? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence said it all. He never brought it up again. But after that, he stopped inviting me to stuff. That conversation stuck with me longer than I expected. His reaction, the way his face had changed, from curious to disturbed in about 3 seconds. That was the first time I started to think, maybe this isn't normal. A couple weeks later, I asked Gordon about the ancestors. Which ones exactly? I said. What were their names? He narrowed his eyes, like I'd just accused him of lying. Don't get clever, Lewis, he said, standing in the garage, wiping grease from his hands. This isn't for school projects. It's for Heritage Day, I said. They want us to write about where our families come from. I just thought, if we had names or something, I could talk about the sailors. His face changed. Not angry at first. Just scared. Real, honest fear. I saw his hands tighten around the rag. His knuckles went white. We don't dig up the past, he snapped. It dishonors the promise. The bloodline doesn't ask for attention. It asks for reverence. That was new. The promise. I asked what he meant, and that's when he really lost it. You want to betray everything we are? He shouted. Is that it? You want to mock what I've carried all these years? After all I've done? I stood there, frozen, watching this man, my father, crack open in front of me like something inside him had just slipped loose. He didn't yell like a normal dad. He pleaded, desperate and wild-eyed. And I remember thinking, this isn't about sailors. This is about something else. I never asked again. Not about the ancestors. Not about the promise. But the look on his face that day, the fear, not the anger, that never left me. Even back then, I knew it was hiding something bigger. It started with a Google search. Late one night, maybe a year after the Promise meltdown, I typed the phrase Naval Disasters Rockport Family History into the search bar, more out of curiosity than anything else. I didn't really expect to find much. I tried before, in fits and starts, but the results were always vague. Obituaries. War records that didn't mention our last name. Nothing that matched Gordon's talk of an ancestral ordeal at sea. But this time, I dug deeper. Public archives. Newspaper clippings. I used a scanner at the library and dug into microfilm reels that hadn't seen daylight since the 90s. I kept expecting to hit the usual dead ends. Poorly indexed names, no mention of our family. But then I stumbled onto something that made my heart pause. August 1994. Boy survives 18-hour ordeal under capsized yacht. The article was from a local paper out of Gloucester, and the boy's name, Gordon Bellamy, jumped right off the page. I leaned in closer. He was 6 years old. According to the piece, Gordon and his twin brother were out on a family friend's yacht when a sudden storm rolled in. The boat capsized off the coast of Maine. Most of the adults were rescued within the hour, but the twins had been trapped in the belly of the overturned vessel. It took 18 hours to reach them. By the time divers finally cut through to the lower compartments, only one boy was alive. Gordon. The article quoted one of the rescuers. I read the line twice. We found the boy curled in the corner, talking softly. We thought he was unconscious at first, but he kept whispering something. Jasper's cold. Jasper says stay. Jasper. The name he said in my apartment. The name I hadn't heard in years. The article continued. The surviving twin appeared confused, repeatedly referring to his brother as if he were still present. Authorities say Gordon was found with tally marks etched into the fiberglass wall. He appeared physically unharmed, but mentally fixated on a vow he claimed to have made during the night. The word hit me like a slap. Vow. That's what landing night was. Not a tradition. Not a ritual passed down through generations. It was Gordon's trauma, played out year after year. Staged. Reenacted. It wasn't about a bloodline of sailors. It was about one shipwreck, one night, one lost twin. One boy who couldn't let go. I sat there in the dark library, scrolling back up to the grainy scanned photo. It was Gordon, no doubt about it. Short hair, wide eyes. Holding the hand of a woman, his mother, I guessed, looking dazed, wrapped in a rescue blanket. I remembered something then. One landing night, years ago. I was maybe 10. I had cried out in the dark, telling Dad I was scared. And I swear, I remember this like a scar. He called back through the floorboards. Jasper didn't cry. Jasper stayed. I never understood what that meant. Not until now. He wasn't talking about an ancestor. He wasn't talking about history. He was talking to his brother. A brother who died in the dark. And Gordon had never left that hold. He just pulled us in with him. It happened again the following Wednesday. I'd just fallen asleep, sometime after midnight. The kind of deep, dreamless sleep that only hits when you've been mentally overloaded for days. That's when I heard the knocking. Not loud, just persistent. Slow, deliberate taps on the door, spaced a few seconds apart like a metronome. I jolted upright, disoriented, heart racing. I didn't even check the peephole this time. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, Gordon stood there, same windbreaker from last time, same blank, twitchy eyes, same smell of old seawater and dirt. His expression was different, though, sharper, like he'd come with a purpose. "You shouldn't dig, Lewis," he murmured. "The past is sacred. You hear me? Sacred." His voice was calm, but his hands shook. He wasn't holding anything. Didn't threaten me. He just said those words, then walked away. I stood frozen in the doorway until his figure vanished into the night. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Emma. "Is he at your place?" she said, panicked. "He was," I said. "Why?" "He just left mine. About an hour ago. Showed up, banging on the windows. He kept asking what you told me. He looked insane, Lewis." She sounded shaken, like she hadn't caught her breath yet. "I didn't tell you anything," I said. "Not yet." She was quiet for a second. "Well, he thinks you did." I spent the rest of that night pacing the apartment, unable to sleep. The next morning, I noticed it. The folders on my desktop? Gone. Photos I'd taken of the newspaper archive, screenshots, files, even my browser bookmarks? All wiped. Even the footage from the indoor security cam was missing. The cloud storage had been accessed and cleared. Browser history, gone. He'd been inside. I didn't know how, but I knew it. I checked the back window. The screen had been lifted and reset, crooked, the way I'd always placed it perfectly level. I wanted to scream. Instead, I locked everything, changed passwords, backed up what little I had left. Then my phone buzzed again. It was a text from my mother. "Please come home. Your father hasn't slept in days. He's not himself. He says he's trying to protect the fleet." The fleet. He always used that word, like we were some naval command unit. A bloodline with duties and ranks. But now, it just sounded pathetic. Or worse, dangerous. I stared at the text and thought, how far was he willing to go? That evening, I packed a bag and got in the car. I hadn't driven back to the family home in over a year. I told myself it was just to check on things. Make sure Emma and Mom were okay. Try to talk sense into him. But the truth was, I didn't know what I was walking into. Gordon wasn't unraveling. He was preparing. The dockyard looked exactly the same. That familiar stretch of gravel, the rusted metal gate creaking in the wind, and the old sailboat, weathered, patched, leaning just slightly in its cradle like it was too tired to stand up straight. I parked a few yards away and stepped out, the cold air slapping my face awake. There was a light on inside the hull, a soft orange glow leaking through the cracks in the wood. I walked toward it slowly, gravel crunching under my boots. No sign of Mom. No sign of Emma. Just Gordon, slumped inside the boat's belly, muttering to himself. I climbed the short ladder and stepped into the hold. The smell hit me first. Mildew, salt, and something sour like old sweat. The walls were scuffed with decades of fingerprints and dents. And then I saw them. Tally marks. Hundreds of them. Etched into the wood, the metal, even carved into the beams. Short horizontal slashes, some newer than others. Some so deep the wood had splintered around them. And in the center of it all, Gordon, sitting cross-legged, eyes locked on the far corner of the hold. Whispering. "We kept count, Jasper. You remember? Every hour. We kept count." He didn't look up when I entered. Didn't acknowledge me at all. Just kept talking to that corner like someone was there. 30 years. 18 hours every March. We didn't break it. I swear we didn't. We stayed. I stood there, breath held, trying to find the right words. "Dad," I said finally. "It's me." He turned his head slowly. His eyes were red, wet. But what scared me more was the smile that crept across his face. "Lewis," he said gently, like he'd just woken from a dream. "We were just talking about you." He patted the empty space beside him. "You remember this spot. You cried here once. Said the dark was swallowing you." I didn't move. "What is this, Dad?" I asked. "What are you doing?" "We're almost done," he said. "Jasper's almost free." His gaze darted back to the corner. He says you don't understand. That you think this is a sickness. But it's not. It's loyalty. He gestured to the walls. See? Every year. We kept the hours. I didn't forget. Not once. I stepped forward, careful not to trip over the lantern sitting beside him. Who told you that this was the way to remember him? I asked. Who said this would bring him back? His voice dropped to a whisper. He did. He pointed to the corner again. He talks to me. Sometimes at night. Sometimes in dreams. He's still there, Louis. Trapped in the hold. And I promised I'd stay until he wasn't alone. I looked around, the weight of it all sinking in. The fake lineage, the phantom rituals, the silence in the house growing up. None of it was about legacy. It was about this. About a boy who made a vow in the dark and never came back. Later, back at the house, I searched his study. Tucked behind some old charts and notebooks, I found a leather-bound journal. Weathered, soft from years of handling. Inside were dated entries, one for each year of landing night. March 22nd, 1995. Jasper says the hours are slower this time. March 22nd, 2001. We stayed quiet. The dark was pure. He was close. March 22nd, 2012. The promise is still alive. We are still afloat. All signed, not just Gordon, but Gordon and Jasper. Each year, more desperate, more detached from reality. The last one, dated this past March, just said, I am the hull. He is the tide. We will never split again. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. Gordon hadn't just made peace with the darkness. He'd made it home. The next few weeks were hell. Gordon didn't retreat into silence. He went on the offensive. It started small. Phone calls to my office, long voicemails full of veiled warnings and vague, unsettling metaphors. Storms building, Louis. Hope you've got ballast. My manager forwarded a message from security one afternoon. Apparently, Gordon had shown up at the front desk, sweating, unshaven, and asking if I had filed a defection report. When they told him I wasn't available, he stared at the receptionist and whispered, He's forgotten the tide. They logged the incident and told me to consider a restraining order. I didn't laugh. Emma wasn't spared either. She called me one night, crying. He showed up at my apartment again. He was in the hallway when I got home. Said I'd be lost if I didn't come with him. That it was my duty now. What did you do? I told him to leave. I screamed until the neighbor came out. He left. But, Louis, he's not just confused anymore. He's recruiting. That weekend, I visited Mom. I didn't want to, but I needed to know if she was okay, if he was still dragging her into it. When she answered the door, I barely recognized her. Hair unbrushed, big sweater, bare feet. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She pulled me into the kitchen and poured tea with trembling hands. He's worse at night, she whispered. Walks around the house, muttering. Goes into the basement, stands under the vent like he's talking through the hall. Why haven't you left? I asked. She gave a tired smile. He told me he's protecting the fleet. Then she reached into a drawer and pulled out a stack of envelopes, yellowed at the edges. I found these last week, she said, in his desk. Each one was labeled with a year and a name. 1998, Gordon. 2003, Gordon. 2009, Gordon. Inside, goodbye letters. Departure notes, he called them. Handwritten pages of rambling thoughts, apologies, warnings, long passages about Jasper's calling and finishing the drift. I think he meant to leave them behind if he didn't come back, Mom said. Her voice cracked. He really believed one year would be the last. Has he talked about doing it again this year? She nodded. He said the chain is ready. I took the letters and contacted a trauma specialist the next day. Dr. Kira Alden. I found her through a friend who worked in crisis intervention. She specialized in inherited trauma and delusional systems formed around grief. We met in a neutral office downtown. She was calm, sharp, didn't flinch when I told her about landing night or the tally marks. This is grief mythology, she said. He's constructed a sacred narrative to survive unbearable guilt. That vow he made, it became a belief system. And belief systems can become contagious in families, especially when they're enforced through fear and isolation. Can it be reversed? I asked. She shook her head. Not easily, but it can be interrupted. She advised me to document everything. Gordon's visits, the missing files, the letters. She said, if you don't ground yourself in reality, he'll rewrite it for you. I started journaling every day, printed backups of research, told Emma to do the same. But it didn't stop him. He began calling friends of mine, former coworkers, telling them I was unwell, that I turned on the fleet. A guy I hadn't seen in years texted me, asking if I was in trouble. Meanwhile, Gordon kept pushing Emma. He sent her a package, a length of rope, and a note that read, "It's time to tie off." She didn't speak for hours after opening it. The siege wasn't physical. It was emotional, psychological. He wanted us isolated, off balance, pulled into the undertow of his madness. And beneath it all, quiet, constant, was the threat. This year might be the last. And if we didn't play our part, he might just go down with the ship. 3 weeks before March 22nd, Gordon vanished. Not entirely. He'd still text strange, cryptic messages once every few days, but he stopped showing up in person. No more visits. No calls. Just eerie silence broken by notes like, "The deck is ready. The hours must be honored. Emma has the makings. She feels the swell. Jasper knows who will stay." I tried calling Mom. She didn't answer. When I finally got a hold of her, she sounded drained. "He's at the dry dock every day," she murmured. I stopped asking what he's doing. "He gets angry now. He's preparing." "For what?" I asked, though I already knew. She hesitated. "He says it has to be complete this time, that the storm isn't finished unless the chain holds." Emma and I drove to the dockyard together a few days later. We parked at the fence and watched from a distance. The boat looked different, like it had been gutted and reassembled. A portable heater sat bolted to the wall. A thick marine-grade chain, freshly installed, lay coiled on the floor beside a new bolt anchoring point. Next to it, a steel ankle cuff with a key, a cooler stocked with water, 2 cans of soup, a sleeping bag, a flashlight taped over with red cellophane, and on the back wall of the hold, in bold black marker, 18 hours, until Jasper sleeps. Emma stared at it, her hands trembling in her jacket pockets. "He's going to chain himself in," she said. "He's really going to do it. He thinks this time will finish it," I said, like it's the last chapter in some twisted scripture. That night, I got a call from a man named Hugh Dennison. He was a retired rescue diver. I didn't recognize the name at first, but he said he'd worked the Gloucester wreck back in '94. He'd seen my post online in a boating forum, just a general inquiry I'd made, asking about archival footage from local marine accidents. He said, "You're Gordon Bellamy's boy?" "Yeah," I said cautiously. He cleared his throat. "I pulled your father out of that hull. I was the first one to reach him." I was silent for a beat. "Do you remember what he said?" Hugh took a breath. Not just what he said, what he did. He was whispering the whole time. To his brother. He kept saying, "I'll stay. I'll stay." "You mean after Jasper died?" "No," Hugh said. "That's the thing. Jasper wasn't dead right away." My blood went cold. "There was a thin pocket of air between compartments," he said. "Turns out the boys were separated after the capsize. For a few hours, they were tapping on the hull. Morse code. Talking through the fiberglass. Then silence. I couldn't speak. "I've worked dozens of recoveries," Hugh said softly. "But I never forgot that one. It wasn't the storm that haunted me. It was that little boy begging us to hurry, promising his twin they'd stay together forever." After the call, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at nothing for a long time. That was it. That was the root. Gordon hadn't been trying to relive history. He'd been trying to rewrite it. He had made a promise to a dying brother. And in his mind, he broke it. He survived. Jasper didn't. And now, 30 years later, he was ready to pay the debt in full. Emma and I met at a diner the next morning. She looked like she hadn't slept. "He told me I was next," she said. "He said I'd be the one to keep the log. That someone has to chart the hours when he's gone." I put my hand over hers. "You're not doing it." She nodded slowly. "But if he chains himself down and the heater fails." Her voice cracked. "We won't be able to get to him in time." The clock had started ticking. Landing night was coming. And this time, Gordon wasn't planning to come back. He started early, March 21st. Around 4 p.m. I got the notification from the dockyard's motion-triggered camera, Gordon entering the boat. He was wearing his old Navy peacoat, carrying a duffel bag and the same thermos he used to bring to our landing nights. The file name from the camera was simple, motion_0001. I knew exactly what it meant. He wasn't waiting until midnight. He wasn't waiting for us at all. By the time Emma and I arrived at the dock, the sun was already low. Pale light reflected off the water behind the gravel yard. The wind was stiff, pushing against us like a warning. The boat loomed at the end of the lot, the only structure with any life in it. The hold's hatch was shut. A heavy steel lock sealed it from the inside. "Dad," I yelled, banging on the wood. "Open up." No response. Emma pounded the side with her palm. "You can't do this. Let us in." Nothing. Then his voice. Muffled, calm, and terrifyingly steady. "The descent is already underway." I scrambled around to the side of the hull and climbed up. A small ventilation window sat cracked at the top, just enough to let in air. I pulled out my phone and hit record, aiming the lens through the narrow slit. Gordon sat in the center of the cargo hold. The chain was wrapped around his ankle, bolted to the floor. His duffel bag was open. Inside, a notebook, the old ship's log, a thermos, a red flashlight glowing in his lap. The tally marks lined every inch of wood around him. Hundreds, maybe thousands. He wasn't moving much, just sitting there, breathing deep. Every so often, he muttered something. 1 hour for every mark. 18 more. Then Jasper will know I kept the vow. Emma appeared beside me, eyes wide. Is he praying? I shook my head. He's rehearsing. I hit record. "Dad," I said loud enough to carry. "You don't have to do this. Jasper isn't waiting for you. He's gone." Inside, Gordon looked up slowly. His eyes were glazed but focused. "You think I don't know that?" he said. "You think I don't remember the moment he stopped tapping?" He held up the chain, letting it clink against the bolt. "This isn't about going back. This is about making the ending match the promise." We stayed. That's all he wanted. His voice cracked. "Every year, I thought 18 hours would be enough. Thought if I did it again and again and again, I'd feel clean." He turned to the far corner of the hold, his voice softening. But the dark never gave him back. Emma covered her mouth. Then, Gordon looked directly at the vent. This might be the last one. He picked up the logbook, held it to his chest. Over 30 years. 18 hours each. That's 540 hours in the dark. It still wasn't enough. Then he reached down and placed a small silver key by the drain grate at his feet. "If the hours pass and I haven't come out." He stared up. "Don't wait." I backed away from the vent, heart pounding. "He's serious," I said. "He's not coming out unless we pull him." Emma shook her head. "We have to call someone." "I already did," I said, showing her the screen. "I called the police 20 minutes ago. Told them it was a welfare check. They're on their way." We stayed by the boat until we saw the red and blue lights flash across the gravel. An officer stepped out. Then a second. I pointed toward the hull. "He's inside. Locked himself in. He says he won't come out." The officer radioed something in. Another cop climbed onto the deck and peered through the vent. After a long silence, he turned back. "He says he's not in danger. Says it's a family ritual. Doesn't want to be disturbed." Emma's voice cracked. "He's chained to the floor." The cop nodded. "He also says he has a key. Says it's voluntary. We can't force entry unless he's a danger to himself." "He is a danger to himself," I said. "You don't understand. He's trying to end it." The officer looked at me with that blank, procedural expression. "He's calm. He's lucid. That's all we're required to determine." They packed up and drove off 10 minutes later. We stayed behind, watching the glow of red light flicker through the boards, listening to the wind push against the sides of the boat like a whispering tide. Inside, Gordon was still, waiting to pay the debt. It was just after midnight when the smoke started. Emma and I had gone back to her apartment around 10. We weren't sure what else to do. Gordon had made it clear he didn't want help, and the police had made it clear they weren't going to force it. But neither of us could sleep. I sat on her couch, watching the live security feed from the dockyard camera. It showed the boat, unmoving in the dark, a dim light flickering through the vent like a dying candle. Then, at 12:17 a.m., the screen blurred. At first, I thought it was fog, but it moved too fast. Thick plumes wafted across the lens, slow and shapeless, like a veil being drawn over the frame. My chest tightened. I grabbed my keys. We got there 10 minutes later. The smoke was heavier in person, clinging to the gravel like low fog. It leaked from the seams of the hull, pouring out the cracks like breath from a dying beast. The boat looked like it was exhaling its final words. I ran to the hatch and slammed my fists against it. "Dad." No response. The metal was hot. Too hot. I backed away, panic hitting my throat like a punch. "We need help. He's still in there." Emma called 911 while I sprinted to the gate and waved down a passing car. It was a warehouse worker on his way home. He saw the smoke and slammed on the brakes, jumped out, and helped me try to open the hold. We couldn't. The lock was fused, and the wood was starting to crackle. Sirens screamed in the distance. When the fire trucks pulled in, they didn't hesitate. A team of firefighters hauled in hoses, crowbars, axes, worked fast and brutal. They pried the hatch open in under a minute and flooded the interior with light. Then everything slowed. I watched as two men pulled Gordon out of the hold. He was limp. Black smears streaked his face. His coat was half burned. The thermos had melted to the floor. The heater lay on its side. The metal warped and split open. But he was breathing. A shallow, rattling breath, but alive. They loaded him into the ambulance while one firefighter came over to us, shaking his head. "You're lucky you called when you did. 10 more minutes." He didn't have to finish. We knew. At the hospital, the nurse told us Gordon had severe smoke inhalation but no internal burns. He was unconscious for the first 12 hours. When he finally woke up, the attending psychiatrist asked if we wanted to speak to him. Emma couldn't do it. I did. I stepped into the room, expecting fire, anger, wild-eyed metaphors about the sea and sacrifice. But he was still, propped up in a hospital bed, tubes in his nose, skin pale and damp with sweat. When he saw me, he blinked slowly, then whispered, "Did the chain hold?" I nodded. "You didn't let go." He stared at the ceiling, didn't speak again, didn't ask for Jasper, didn't mention the vow. The light was gone, not extinguished, just silent, like the voice inside him had finally grown tired. Later, I asked the doctor what he thought. "Sometimes," he said, "the mind breaks a little to keep itself alive. But when you confront the very thing that's been driving you, when you face it, and it almost kills you, that voice can go quiet." "So is he cured?" The doctor shook his head. "No, but he's empty now. And sometimes, that's where healing has to start." I looked through the hospital glass one last time before I left. Gordon stared out the window, blinking slowly. And for the first time since I was a kid, I couldn't tell if he was listening for Jasper or learning how to be alone. 6 months passed. The dockyard boat sat untouched, still chained, still scarred, but empty. The hull had been scrubbed out and repainted, first by the yard manager, then by a crew sent by the city when rumors of the fire started spreading. There were no more tally marks, no more soft red light flickering behind the slats. Just a quiet, rotting boat no one wanted to talk about anymore. Gordon was in long-term care, a private psychiatric facility on the north side of the state. He didn't resist. When the hospital released him, he didn't argue. He barely spoke at all. The doctors said he drifted in and out, sometimes cooperative, sometimes vacant. A slow unspooling, they called it. Years of obsession loosening by inches. Emma and I visited him every couple weeks. The first time, he didn't recognize us. The second time, he called Emma Jasper and asked if the tide had turned. By the third visit, he just stared at the window, blinking. Silent. Mom moved into a small townhouse near downtown. She finally sold the house, the one we grew up in. Said she couldn't walk through the hallway without thinking of the basement and Gordon's footsteps above the vent. I offered to help with the move, but she handled it herself. Said it felt good to lift things without waiting for someone to shout about tradition. When she hugged me goodbye, she held on longer than she used to. No big speech, just one sentence. "Thank you for staying above deck." I didn't cry, but my chest stayed tight for days. Emma started therapy. Intense, twice-a-week sessions with Dr. Alden. They focused on memory untangling, teasing out the years of gaslight and guilt that Gordon had wrapped around us like ropes. One day, she called me crying. Said she finally remembered her first landing night in full, how Dad had blindfolded her for the immersion, how she'd begged to come back up, and how Mom had whispered through the hatch, "Just breathe through it, baby. You'll feel proud when it's over." Pride, she said, had always come laced with fear. Now she was learning how to tell the difference. As for me, I still get twitchy in March. The 22nd came around again. No midnight knocks. No boats. No chains. I took the day off work and didn't tell anyone why. I drove up to the coast around 6, parked at a cliff overlook, and sat with a candle. No ritual. No tally. Just a small flame, flickering against the wind. One hand around the base, the other in my coat pocket. I thought about Jasper. I thought about Gordon. And I thought about how grief becomes a map when no one teaches you how to leave the shore. Gordon and I speak sometimes. Supervised phone calls, once a month. They're brief. He doesn't bring up the boat anymore. Doesn't ask about the logbook. He doesn't mention landing night, or the vow, or the hours. Instead, we talk about real things. Like the time Jasper broke his tooth falling off a bike and Gordon cried because he thought he caused it. Or the fishing trip where Jasper caught a boot and insisted it was pirate treasure. Or how Jasper used to sing off-key every time they went to sleep. Little things. True things. The past, without the myth. The cycle is broken. Not because we burned the boat, but because we stopped following its course. We stopped calling the darkness sacred. We stopped mistaking pain for purpose. And somewhere in that silence, we began to heal.